my good sir. Perhaps we got off on the wrong boot. Allow me to unring this bell. My name is Dr. King Schultz. This is my valet, Django. And these are our horses, Tony and Fritz.
Django Unchained is still Quentin Tarantino's highest-grossing movie, and it's the one that earned him his second Oscar for Best Original Screenplay after the success of Pulp Fiction. And honestly, that might never have happened without Christoph Waltz's incredible performance.
My good man, did you simply get carried away with your dramatic gesture, or are you pointing your weapon at me with lethal intention?
By then, Waltz already had one Oscar in the bag for playing the charming but terrifying Hans Landa in another Tarantino film.
If a rat were to walk in here right now as I'm talking, would you greet it with a source of your delicious milk?
Just 3 years later, he was back on that stage, but this time for playing a hero.
You really want me to shake your hand? I insist. If you insist.
In movie history, it's rare for an actor to win the top prize for both a villain and a hero. You can count those cases on one hand. Dr. King Schultz might be the warmest, most genuinely good-hearted character Tarantino has ever written. Usually his characters live in a morally gray zone. Think The Hateful Eight or Reservoir Dogs. But even Schultz has his shadows. He's still a bounty hunter who makes his living by bringing in wanted criminals, dead or alive.
This is what I do. I kill people and sell their corpses for cash.
So what makes a man who never planned on rescuing Django take a step that's basically an act of self-sacrifice? Why would someone who always plays by the rules suddenly break the very laws he's sworn to follow? In this breakdown, I'm going to dig into Dr. Schultz's inner struggle, that small crack in his worldview that eventually led to his fatal choice. We'll look at the philosophy behind his actions, and why this character might just capture the core message of the entire film better than anyone else. Not many people know this, but Quentin Tarantino originally wrote the script for Django Unchained with one specific actor in mind, Will Smith. The talks were official, and Tarantino even met with Smith in person to go over the details. But in the end, Smith turned the role down. In an interview, Smith explained that, in his opinion, Django wasn't written strongly enough as the main character. The breaking point for him was a key scene. Calvin Candy isn't killed by Django, but by Dr. Schultz. Smith felt it should have been Django who pulled the trigger. Tarantino, however, refused to change it. In his view, if a black hero killed a white slave owner, it would just play like a straightforward revenge story. But if a white man, Dr. Schultz, did it, the moment would become a symbol of change, a moral awakening, and a clean break from the past. That creative disagreement alone shows just how important King Schultz was to Tarantino's vision, and how much bigger the movie's ambition was than just being a revenge western. This was a story where the character's personal struggles doubled as a metaphor for a turning point in history. Interestingly, the themes Tarantino explores in Django Unchained overlap with another one of his films, The Hateful Eight.
I'll be dog. You black fella I know, Colonel something or other Warren, right?
Major Marcus Warren.
If Django takes place right before the American Civil War, The Hateful Eight unfolds after it's over. And in that story, we meet a character who feels like he could easily be related to Dr. Schultz. I'm talking about Oswaldo Mowbray.
Oswaldo Mowbray.
Oswaldo?
Yes.
The resemblance is so striking, it's almost surprising that Tim Roth played him instead of Christoph Waltz.
I'm afraid I will require a bill of sale. Do you have one?
Do you have a warrant? Of course I do.
May I see it?
But I must warn you, the penalty for taking deadly force against an officer of the court in the performance of his duty is you'll be hung by the neck until you're dead.
If you shoot this unarmed old man, I guarantee I will hang you by the neck until you are dead.
Both are Europeans in America. Both speak with overly polite, carefully measured intonation. The word proper fits them perfectly. Roth's performance as Mowbray carries the exact same vibe Waltz brought to Schultz, and visually, they could almost pass for brothers. But it's not just the look or the manners that connect them, it's the ideas they raise. Remember the scene in The Hateful Eight where Oswaldo, in a theatrical tone, explains the difference between justice and vigilantism?
If the people of Red Rock will hang you in the town square, and as the hangman, I will perform the execution. If all those things end up taking place, that's called justice. If the relatives and the loved ones of the person you murdered were outside that door, and after busting down that door, they hung you up by the neck, that would be frontier justice.
The same action, done to the same person with the same result, can be called a crime in one case and a lawful act in another, all depending on who carries it out.
What's the real difference between the two? Well, the real difference is me, the hangman.
If it's done by a mob, it's vigilante justice. If it's done by someone with an official mandate, it's justice. Same blood, same outcome, but now with the stamp of the law. A similar situation plays out with King Schultz. He rides into a small southern town and in front of everyone, calmly shoots the local sheriff dead. At first glance, it looks like an open and shut case of murder in broad daylight.
Did you just do the sheriff?
But then, Schultz pulls out a document signed by a judge.
Like yourself, Marshal, I'm a servant of the court. This is a warrant made out by Circuit Court Judge.
And suddenly, everything changes. What a moment ago seemed like blatant lawlessness instantly becomes official procedure, and the gunman transforms from a criminal into a representative of the state, an agent with the government's monopoly on violence.
In other words, Marshal, you owe me $200.
It's basically the same idea Oswaldo Mowbray talks about. The legitimacy of violence isn't about the act itself, but who commits it and under what authority. Schultz is a man who believes deeply in the letter of the law. He knows the world is unfair, yet he seems genuinely convinced that justice can still be done without crossing legal lines.
We were operating within our legal boundaries.
Maybe that's why he left his medical practice, to stop treating toothaches and start dealing with something far more rotten. People the law has officially sanctioned him to kill.
Despite that cart, I haven't practiced dentistry in 5 years.
From the very first minutes of the film, he shows how committed he is to doing things by the book. Yes, he kills the Speck brothers, but it's in self-defense.
I only shot your brother once. He threatened to shoot me. And I do believe I have 5 witnesses who can attest to that fact.
Yes, he takes Django, but it's part of a legal purchase with signed paperwork.
For young Django here, and I'd like to purchase your brother's nag.
For Schultz, everything must look proper on paper.
No worries. This will serve nicely as a bill of sale.
He may take a life, but there's always a warrant. He may free a slave, but it's always through an official deal. That kind of legal formalism acts like a shield for him. As long as everything is done by the law, he can see himself as clean and avoid feeling guilty for what he's done.
So for the time being, I'm gonna make this slavery malarkey work to my benefit. Still, having said that, I feel guilty.
It's important to understand that, at the start of his journey, Dr. King Schultz isn't driven by noble intentions.
I'm looking for the Brittle brothers. However, at this endeavor, I'm at a slight disadvantage, but you do.
His first moves might look heroic, freeing Django, killing slave traders, but there's no grand moral mission behind them. It's pure pragmatism.
The way the slave trade deals in human lives for cash, a bounty hunter deals in corpses. Like slavery, it's a flesh for cash business.
Schultz needs someone who can identify the Brittle brothers, 3 men with big bounties on their heads. Django isn't a partner or a protege in Schultz's eyes. He's a tool, and Schultz says this openly. But by the time he reaches the end of his path, Schultz is no longer the same man we met at the beginning. On the surface, he's still calm, decisive, and unshakable. Inside, though, a quiet conflict has been building, a personal, painful dilemma that will eventually push him to take a step he never would have considered before. To really understand the nature of that dilemma, you have to step outside the plot and look at a few key principles from the philosophy of law. These ideas act like invisible tracks guiding Schultz's story, and they hold the answer to why he ultimately makes the fatal choice that defines his character. I've already mentioned that for Dr. King Schultz, the law isn't just a guideline, it's almost a sacred code. He's used to doing everything by the book. Papers signed, deals documented, every bullet he fires backed by a formal reason. But that leads to a much bigger question. What's actually behind the law? Why does it exist? And in the end, does it really serve justice? In legal philosophy, there are two core concepts: the letter of the law and the spirit of the law. There are plenty of definitions, but the idea is simple. The letter is the written text, while the spirit is the meaning and purpose behind it. As far back as Aristotle and Cicero, thinkers warned that a law stripped of morality can become a dangerous weapon. In the Middle Ages, Thomas Aquinas built on this idea, and later Montesquieu gave it a clear, systematic form in the spirit of the laws. He argued that an ideal law reflects not just the will of those in power, but also the shared moral goals of society. A law should not only regulate, but also guide, not only punish, but protect. In modern legal thought, the gold standard is when a court's decision honors both the letter and the spirit of the law, when it's not only technically correct, but also feels just and fair on a human, moral level. Why am I even bringing this up? And what does it have to do with Dr. Schultz? Because I think this is where his core dilemma really lies. What do you do when the letter of the law clashes with its spirit? From the very start, Schultz is convinced, or at least trying to convince himself, that anything done strictly by the law is automatically fair, not because he's some naive idealist, but because that belief is the foundation of his entire worldview.
You kill people and they give you a reward? Certain people, bad people.
Ah, badder they are, bigger the reward.
There's one scene that makes this crystal clear. Schultz and Django are hunting their next target, a man named Smitty Bacall. Django has him in his sights, but then hesitates.
What happened to Mr. I want to shoot white folks for money?
His son's with him.
This isn't some cartoonish villain in chains. It's a man working in a field alongside his young son. He looks more like a farmer than a murderer. That raises the question, is enforcing the law like this really justice? Schultz's answer is purely pragmatic.
Let's take out Smitty Bacall's handprint.
He pulls out an official document that spells it out in black and white. Smitty Bacall is a robber and a killer, with a $7,000 bounty on his head. His conclusion? If this man truly wanted to live a quiet, honest life, his name wouldn't still be on that wanted list.
That is who Smitty Bacall is. If Smitty Bacall wanted to start a firm at 22, they would never have printed that.
That's Schultz in a nutshell during the early part of the story. He doesn't know this man personally, doesn't dig into the details, doesn't ask any extra questions. There's a paper with a signature on it. That's all he needs. The document says criminal, so he's a criminal. It says he deserves to die, so in Schultz's mind, that's justice served.
This corpse is worth $70,000. Now quit your pussyfooting and shoot him.
This scene is a key to understanding his worldview, and its real value is that later in the film, it gets turned on its head. Sometime later, Schultz and Django have a short but telling exchange. Now it's Schultz trying to rein in his partner. Django's acting too confidently, too coldly.
Stop antagonizing Candy. You're going to blow this whole charade.
And to Schultz, it's starting to look like cruelty for cruelty's sake.
You yelling abuse at these poor slaves?
But Django calmly throws Schultz's own words back at him.
I recall a man who had me kill another man in front of his son, and he didn't bat an eye.
This world is brutal, and sometimes to survive, you have to be just as brutal.
I said, this is my world, and in my world you gotta get dirty. So that's what I'm doing.
For the first time, Schultz's eyes show doubt, maybe even a little confusion.
You remember that?
Of course I remember.
It's like the foundation he's been standing on all this time starts to crack, and he has no choice but to admit Django has a point. To me, this is the moment when his certainty begins to unravel. He starts questioning whether he was right to teach Django those rules in the first place.
Well, you're paraphrasing a tad, but
That was the general gist.
And even deeper, whether he was ever right to believe that law automatically equals justice. He's beginning to see that the two don't always line up. The law isn't always fair, and fairness isn't always legal. If you go back to the very first scenes, you can see how Schultz's idea of law and justice starts to shift, slowly, almost without him realizing it. At first, it's just a small jolt, the moment he sees Django's back covered in deep scars. But the real breaking point comes later, inside Calvin Candy's mansion. By the letter of the law, Candy is spotless.
Broomhilda here is my property, and I can choose to do with my property whatever I so desire.
His paperwork is perfect. Every deal is signed and sealed, and his plantation operates within the rules. But in reality, Candyland is a fully legalized hell.
Finish him. Go on, boy, finish him.
It's a place where people are forced to fight to the death for sport, where a man can be torn apart by dogs, where a woman can be sold off like she's a piece of property. Here's the key detail. Tarantino made Schultz a German, a European, an outsider. In Europe's colonies at the time, slavery still existed, but in Europe itself, it was already seen as barbaric and inhumane. That's why Candyland hits him so hard.
He just ain't used to seeing a man ripped apart by dogs is all.
You are used to it.
I'm just a little more used to Americans than he is.
It's not just a workplace, it's a cultural shock of the worst kind. And then Schultz learns that Django's wife is named Broomhilda, the same name as the heroine from a German epic, and that she speaks his native language. Suddenly, this isn't just another job. In her story, he hears an echo of his own culture. Freeing her stops being part of a deal and becomes a matter of honor.
Broomhilda.
What?
Broomhilda.
Brunhilde?
Calvin Candy truly believes he's a refined, cultured gentleman. He speaks with exaggerated politeness, lectures about phrenology, shows off his so-called scientific knowledge, and hosts dinner as if it's an event in some high-class salon.
If I was holding the skull of an Isaac Newton or Galileo.
But behind all that polish is pure brutality. In his home, men are forced to fight to the death for entertainment. Women are sold like merchandise, and at any moment, a slave can be fed to the dogs. And then, just as the deal is about to be finalized, Beethoven starts playing. The music of a German composer Schultz associates with high art and culture. But here, in Candyland, that melody turns into a cruel joke. Over those elegant notes, we see Schultz preparing legal papers, giving this nightmare the appearance of proper lawful business, the very thing he's always respected and believed in. And suddenly, something inside him breaks. German music in a house built on slavery feels like a personal insult.
Excuse me. Could you please stop playing Beethoven? Take your hands off the harp.
Schultz is ready to walk away and never come back. But Candy, relishing his role as the man in control, demands a final gesture, a handshake to seal the deal.
In Chickasaw County, a deal ain't done until the two parties have shook hands.
On the surface, it's just politeness, a formality, a sign that the rules have been followed. But in that moment, Schultz chooses justice over rules. He can't stand to play along with the lie any longer. By refusing to take part in the ritual, he steps over his own principles for the first time, and as it turns out, for the last. Dr. King Schultz isn't just an important character in Django Unchained. He's the voice of the filmmaker and the moral backbone of the whole story. Even his name is a direct nod to Martin Luther King Jr., the legendary civil rights leader who openly questioned the fairness of existing laws. Martin Luther King Jr. wasn't just an activist and Nobel Peace Prize winner. He was also a profound thinker. In his famous letter from Birmingham jail, he wrote, "There are two types of laws, just and unjust. And as Augustine said, an unjust law is no law at all." This idea is the key to understanding Schultz's inner conflict.
You really want me to shake your hand?
He finds himself in a world where the law is nothing more than a storefront hiding violence and exploitation. And when he's forced to face that reality head-on, he realizes that when rules protect evil, the only moral choice is to stop following them. If you enjoyed this breakdown and want to see more videos about Tarantino's films, hit that like button and subscribe. That way, the algorithm will know you're into this kind of content and share it with more people. And for me, it's a sign that you enjoy these character deep dives. So I'll keep making new ones that are just as detailed and surprising.